Konnichiwa, and welcome to the first episode of a four-part podcast series that will explore the creativity, effort, and deliciousness of Japanese cuisine. I had the privilege to travel to Japan this summer, and while I was out there, I tried so many different famous Japanese dishes that made my taste buds dance around. In this podcast, I not only want to discuss the meals, but the cultural significance behind each dish. Food holds power, and I will be breaking down the connection food helps grow. If you are a foodie like me, I encourage you to join me on this journey exploring all these meals and the effectiveness behind them. Welcome to Savor Japan. The first meal that we will be discussing is rich with flavor and combines multiple elements to create an essential dish, ramen. Ramen is arguably one of the most popular dishes you can get while you are in Japan. Most people only experience ramen from the Maruchan ramen noodle soup packets, which you can find at almost any store within the United States. While those ramen packets are sufficient, especially for college students, the beauty of the meal is lost. The process to making an authentic ramen dish takes time and effort that may span a total of 3 days just to achieve top tier quality. One thing that many people fail to realize about ramen is that it did not originate in Japan. They were the first to make wheat noodle dishes. Ramen was introduced to Japan in the year 1859 when a Chinese ambassador presented the meal to the Japanese emperor of the time. Ramen would then rapidly become widespread across the country, with many Japanese citizens attempting their own versions of the dish. Most ramens in Japan are comprised of a base broth with pork or chicken flavors. The most common type of noodles used are wheat noodles, which again originated in China. From there are a variety of toppings such as sliced pork, green onions, soft boiled eggs, seaweed, and bean sprouts. The time I mentioned it takes to make the ramen stems from the creation of the broth itself. The broths are created from combining multiple elements such as like simmering animal bones, and that could be pork or chicken, and also including in the meat as well. Dashi is a Japanese soup stock that is commonly used for the broths as well. A variety of vegetables and aromatics are used, such as onions, garlic, ginger, dried mushrooms, leeks, and scallions. For extra flavor, some people tend to add a little bit of chili oil just to enhance the flavor overall. Typically, you let all of these things simmer in a pot for 24 hours. The more premium broths take about 3 days to make, and those broths are some of the most creamy and flavorful broths you can get out there. Now, I want to talk about my personal experience with ramen. While I was in Japan, I did have multiple opportunities to try different types of ramen, but the one that stuck out to me the most was from a mom and pop shop that I had while I was in Abiko. During the trip, we spent a lot of time in Abiko just because that's where a lot of our cultural classes were. And there was one specific day where me and a few of my friends on the trip decided to just get some ramen because we wanted a quick lunch and we wanted something that was also tasty. We walked around the area for a bit just trying to see like all the different options, and then we just came across this little shop that was at the end of the street, and we decided to just head in. My first impressions of the restaurant we walked into was that it was definitely a lot smaller than I thought it was going to be, but I was so okay with that though. I'm a person that enjoys smaller spaces compared to like wide open areas, so that was pretty nice for me personally. So we took a seat at the table. I believe the table was like right against the entrance, so the door kept opening, so people kept walking in and out, which got kind of annoying after a bit just because it was like a lot of people just constantly like brushing past us, but it's something you just got to deal with. So when I was looking at the menu specifically, I was a little taken aback just because there were no English translations at all. And the other restaurants we've been to at that point did have some translations. So I'm not gonna lie, I thought I was a little done for at first because I didn't want to order the wrong thing, thinking it would have been ramen, and then it got a completely different dish. But I have been studying Japanese to that point about a year, I would say. So I was able to use the knowledge I've gained just to read the menu a bit, and I was able to help my friends out with that. So we all ordered, and they took the food probably about like 10 minutes to come out, which was pretty fast, especially compared to restaurants out here in the United States where sometimes you're waiting up to an hour just to get some pretty mid food, if I'm being honest. When the food arrived, the first thing that hit my nose was just the smell of the broth. And the broth smelled just so good, I will admit. I've had like ramen out in the United States before, especially at like some ramen shops, but it just did not compare to the sight of the ramen in Japan. The ramen I specifically ordered was a pork based broth that had three slices of pork, two boiled eggs, and a lot of seaweed on top, and little green onions for Danish. My friends got similar dishes. Some of them had either more pork than I did or less pork, but it was all around the same. Definitely looking at it from just like a sight point of view, the ramen was just beautiful, honestly. And and I know that sounds really weird to call a food beautiful, but it was. I'd personally see ramen as an art piece just because of the combinations you could come up with when you're making the dish. And the way that it was laid out too was just really nice and pleasant on the eyes, I would definitely say. So I grabbed my chopsticks. I I struggled for about a minute, I believe, just to like actually hold it right, but we got there. And I took my first bite, and the second I took that bite, I literally put down my chopsticks and I looked at everyone. I was like, guys, this is the best ramen I have ever had. And I wasn't lying. The broth itself was so creamy. It was seasoned to a T, and I fell in love right there. I think I was even drooling a bit, if I'm being honest. It was just so good, and even the sliced pork that they used was really tender, and it just when you took a bite, it just sank into your mouth. And I mean, there is a rule in Japan where you're not actually supposed to slurp your ramen just because it is typically deemed as a little rude. But I was slurping a bit. I will admit, I was slurping just because it was that good. The ramen noodles themselves were just so nice, and there was a plentiful amount of them. So I just did not stop eating the second I had it in front of me. Most of the times when I'm eating a meal, I do tend to stop talking for a bit and just, like just focus on my meal. But then I'll typically pick back up with a conversation. No, this meal had no talking, nothing out of any of us. We were just eating our food and just going crazy on it. I believe my favorite part, though, was literally just, I already mentioned it, but definitely the pork was just so good. It just complemented the meal to a really high degree. And I think it brought together just all the elements that were combined to make the ramen itself. Ramen has become one of the most popular dishes in Japan and is considered the soul food of the country. Ramen is both easy, accessible, and a cheaper meal to attain that is very filling. Ramen is also customizable, which allows people to become creative with what they do with the dish. You could go to any region of the country and experience a different type of ramen, which I think is so amazing. The reason why most people have a connection with the dish is because during World War II, ramen was a lot cheaper to obtain, not only for soldiers, but also families during the same period. Many people now contribute their favorite memories to having a good bowl of ramen. I think what stands out the most for me about the meal is just the amazing varieties that are out there. I mean, I didn't even get to try every single one of them. If I could, I would have, but unfortunately, I didn't have the time or the money to do that. But that's just something I could do next time I go to Japan, and that's something I'm really looking forward to. When I think back to the mom and pop shop I went to, I could tell that the owners of the shop were very hardworking and they really cared about the quality of the food that they gave out. I was not disappointed at all with my meal and I had no complaints. Typically, I could be a picky eater, I will admit it, because I know what I like. And that hit everything on my list that day. Ramen to me is almost like an art piece. You can do literally anything you want to create your own special variation of it. And I think that's like a beautiful thing of it. That's the beautiful thing of ramen. It's just not only tasty, but it's just something really pleasant to have and just look at. Well, that's all the time we have for this episode. If you want more, stay tuned. I have 3 more episodes coming out to discuss more meals. I want to end every episode by encouraging you all to go out and try a new meal you never had before. The world is varied with basically infinite meals to try. You will never know what your favorite meal may become if you never take that step into the unknown. This has been episode 1 of Savor Japan. Arigatou gozaimasu. Ja, mata ne. Konnichiwa, and welcome to the second episode of a 4-part podcast series that will explore the creativity, effort, and deliciousness of Japanese cuisine. I had the privilege to travel to Japan this summer, and while I was out there, I tried so many different famous dishes that made my taste buds dance around. In this podcast, I not only want to discuss the meals, but the cultural significance behind each dish. Food holds power, and I'll be breaking down the connections food helps grow. If you are a foodie like me, I encourage you to join me on this journey exploring all these meals and the effectiveness behind them. Welcome to Savor Japan. In this episode, we'll be discussing one of Japan's more simple dishes that can either be a side to a bigger meal or just a light snack. Onigiri. Onigiri is a popular dish, especially for students to have during lunchtime or for someone to, nibble on after a huge hike they had. The dish is typically placed amongst a bento box, which are Japanese style lunch boxes. Well, in other words, onigiri is equivalent to a hot dog in America because out in America, you could go to a hot dog stand anywhere basically and get a quick hot dog for really cheap. Onigiri is a triangular shaped rice ball that has a variety of fillings such as salmon or tuna with mayo. A little seasoning is added to make this dish both a little salty and sour at the same time. But sour in a good way though. The rice ball is then wrapped in a dry seaweed, and that's how it's done. I know, seems very straightforward, but trust me, once you take that bite into it, it's so good for no reason. Onigiri has a history in Japan that spans 2,000 years, which when I found out about that myself, I was genuinely shocked, just because that's way longer than I thought it would be. So the story behind it is that archaeologists actually found clumps of carbonized rice in ruins that dates back to the Yayoi period, which was between 300 BCE, which ended at 250 CE. Finger marks were actually found on the rice balls, which provide evidence of people from 1,000 years ago using the same techniques we use today in order to make this dish. But instead of thin processed nori seaweed used for it, these were made with bamboo leaves. During the high end period, which was between 794 to 1185 CE, a version of onigiri called tonjiki, which were used by higher class family members as gifts to their domestic servants, was also a convenient food for farm workers. The use of nori seaweed began at the end of the 17th century during the Edo period. It was around that time children would actually start taking these small treats to school for lunch. But the thing that is really interesting is that onigiri was not just for the poor classes, because it would seem that way, especially with the higher end families using it as gifts. Onigiri began to be eaten at special occasions such as firework displays and hanami, which was the practice of viewing and picnicking under the beautiful, iconic cherry blossom trees. And I want to say this right now, I was very disappointed I wasn't able to be in Japan during cherry blossom season because I know how beautiful and just breathtaking that scene would have been when eating an onigiri. But onigiri would then go through many variations, which led to the modern form of the meal that we discussed earlier. Now, let's talk about my experience with the dish. My first experience with onigiri in Japan was on just I think it was like during like the weekday. It wasn't anything special, wasn't anything crazy happening. Literally, it was I think it was like 10 a.m. in the morning, and I was tired. I will admit we had a late night because we were just out roaming Japan. Because I mean, when you're on vacation, you don't just sit around. You go out, you have fun, and that's what we were doing. So me and my classmates, we went to Skytree that night before, and it was a really fun time. If you are ever in Japan, I highly recommend Skytree is one of the places that you go because you get a great view of Tokyo while you're out there. So in the morning, I really wasn't in the mood for like a solid meal or anything. I just needed something really simple. So I went to the convenience store, or a konbini, which they're called in Japan, that was right next to our hotel. It was a family mart. And I just started looking around the shelves, just trying to find something because again, I didn't want something heavy. I just want something light just to give myself a little bit of energy before we went roaming because I knew today was going to be a heavy walking day and I knew I was just going to make myself sick if I had anything else. So I'm looking around and I finally see just like, like those onigiris just like right there on the shelf. And I'm just like, you know what? Because I seen them a lot on like shows or like anime and stuff like that. So I was like, you know what? I think I'm gonna get that. So I bought it. I believe it was just about 300 yen, which is really cheap. Like everything is in Japan, which I was thankful for, as a college student. So I went back to the hotel after I bought it, went to my room, and I sat down in my bed just to enjoy this little treat I had bought myself. The one I selected specifically was a tuna mayo blend filling. So I literally didn't know what to expect because I will admit ahead of time, I was just thinking, oh, this is not going to be really anything special just because of how simple it was. But the second I took that first bite, I had to pause. Like, I physically had to stop myself because I was like, hold on, wait a minute. Why is this actually really good? It didn't really make sense to me. So I kept eating it, and everything just kept hitting me. Like the seasoning of it, the tuna itself also was really well done. It was made like pretty good. Like I feel like my issue with tuna out here in the United States is that sometimes I think it's a little too thick, but the way they did it out there was really nice, and the mayo too. The mayo surprisingly was way better than like the Miracle Whips and whatnot. And I know it sounds like I'm always comparing the experience of of food with things from within the United States, but for me personally, that's the only food that I've ever really had. So that's my basis of how I'm gonna judge the meals I had. But the onigiri was really good. I'm gonna be honest. Like, I mean, the rice too was really nice. And I love seaweed, so having that wrapped in that was just a little bonus for me. And I'm gonna be honest with you, I literally was like, "Wow, that was really good." That I went back and I got two more, and then I got a salmon flavor one. The salmon one was actually my favorite because it had a little smoky taste to it, and I love smoked food. Like my dad makes a really good smoked brisket, for example. So you know I know my smoked food. So I ate it and I was like, oh my gosh, like that was a good choice on my part to go back and get more. But I think at that moment I started to realize just why people love this simple dish so much. Onigiri is convenient and portable since not only can you buy it at basically every convenience store in Japan, but also the fact that you can literally carry it with you. It's small enough to put in your backpack or even if your pocket if you have big pockets. It also has a personal connection with a lot of people since the dish is typically actually homemade. Children share stories of coming home to find their mother making the dish for their families. Having that family connection as an emotional element to the dish because when these children get older, they're still going to eat onigiri and they're going to reflect on their times where their mother made it for them personally. And I know we all have that significant dish in our lives that's relevant to us specifically because of our family. For example, my mother's macaroni and cheese was something that still means a lot to me actually to this day. My mom, man, she's a great chef, honestly, and that's one thing I miss being in college. I say that sounds kind of dark. No, she's still here. Don't worry. But I don't see my mom that as often because I'm out studying. But remember as a kid though, my mom used to make a killer mac and cheese, especially during Thanksgiving and Christmas time, because that's when she really would put a lot more effort into it. So it will literally be the whole thing where me and my sister will wait all year just to have that mac and cheese. And trust you me, the second I bit into that, I devoured. I went crazy on that. So that meal personally meant a lot to me, and I can understand why onigiri in Japan means a lot to a lot of people. Not only because of its convenience, but when you have a personal connection to a meal, it makes it taste 10 times better when you have it. And sometimes it won't taste the same because of the significance that you place on it when it came from having this dish from one certain person. Well, that's all the time we have for this episode. Thank you for listening to me ramble on about the importance of a good meal. If you want more, stay tuned. I have 2 more episodes coming out to discuss more food. I want to end every episode encouraging you all to go out and try a new meal you never had before. The world is varied with basically infinite meals to try. You will never know what your favorite meal may become if you never take that step into the unknown. This has been episode 2 of Savor Japan. Arigatou gozaimasu. Ja, mata ne. Konnichiwa, and welcome to the 3rd episode of a 4-part podcast series that will explore the creativity, effort, and deliciousness of Japanese cuisine. I had the privilege to travel to Japan this summer, and while I was out there, I tried so many different famous Japanese dishes that made my taste buds dance around. In this podcast, I not only want to discuss the meals, but the cultural significance behind every dish. Food holds power, and I will be breaking down the connection food helps grow. If you are a foodie like me, I encourage you to join me on this journey, exploring all these meals and the effectiveness behind them. Welcome to Savor Japan. In this episode, we'll be discussing a lightly battered and deep fried dish that always hits just right, tempura. Tempura is actually considered to be healthier compared to other forms of fried foods. So, definitely not gonna be, your KFC or anything like that. Tempura is a little different from that. Typically, seafood is what's fried, with shrimp being the most popular choice. You can also find tempura in forms of scallops and squid. I personally am not the biggest fan of squid, so I did not try that while I was out there, so I'll put that out right now. Vegetables are typically also fried, like sweet potatoes, eggplants, and much more. Basically any vegetable you can get your hands on. The same way that you make other fried foods is the same for tempura. The batter used for tempura consists of ice water, flour, and egg yolks. The ice water is actually essential because it prevents the gluten from forming within the flour. The batter is mixed with chopsticks very swiftly, but it is important not to overmix it to prevent the batter from becoming lumpy, which you do not want for this. After the ingredients are dipped into the batter, they are put into boiling oil, which is typically around 160 degrees Celsius or 320 degrees Fahrenheit for us Americans. Tempura is cooked in small batches to ensure that the oil temperature stays consistent. Once done, the food should have a light golden brown color to it. The most common sides are miso soup and steamed rice with soy sauce to top it all off. The history of tempura starts in the 16th century during the Muromachi period. Portuguese Catholic missionaries came to Japan and brought with them Western-style cooking methods of coating foods with flour and frying them. Originally, sugar was actually mixed into the flour, and the ingredients were covered in a thick batter containing sake. And for those of you who do not know what sake is basically Japanese alcohol. Then all that was fried in lard. Later, the style of the batter would start to change. In the 17th century, the meal would start to change a bit, especially with Buddhist belief, as with meat not being one of the things that were preferred with the dish. Vegetables became more of a primary thing that was used for frying methods for tempura. However, though, in Western Japan, fish paste was being used to fry the food without batter, which was also considered tempura. Street vendors started to sell tempura just because it became one of the third most popular dishes at the time. And plus, it was safer to make the dish outside just in case if a fire did build out of it. And finally, we get to the modern day tempura, which you can order nearly at any restaurant you want. And it is such a good meal, I must say that. But before I get a little too ahead of myself, let's talk about my own experience with the dish. My personal experience with tempura took place right where I was staying in Kashiwa. It was a late night, I remember, and me and my friends, we were just hungry and we needed food. So we just started walking the streets, just trying to find a restaurant that was still open, just because things in Japan does tend to close pretty early. Like many of the restaurants close around like 10 o'clock, I would say, which was kind of upsetting because there were some days we'll be out late just doing something. So we didn't really get a lot of good meals that night, I would say. But this night specifically, though, we were like, no, we're going to find some place that's open and we're going to get a good meal. So we walked around, I want to say for like 20 minutes, and then we came across this random restaurant that wasn't too far from the hotel. So we were like, you know what, it's open, let's sit down and let's get something from here. So I was looking at the menu, and this was another one of the places that had zero English and no pictures. So I had to lock in, use my Japanese skills, and I was able to read parts of the menu. And I did see they had tempura, specifically shrimp tempura, with a side of miso soup and rice. And that at the moment sounded heavenly to me. So I ordered that, and my friends ordered the same thing actually, because they wanted to copy me. So the food came out in about 20 minutes, which honestly wasn't that bad of a wait time. Again, I'm so used to waiting for my food like an hour, so I really enjoyed that. My first impressions of it was just that it looked so good. The color of it was just on point. Again, because like typically tempura is like a light golden brown color, and that looked photo perfect. I mean, I could have been really hungry also at the same time, so I'm gonna give myself just a little less credit, but still, I did not care in the moment. I took a big bite of that first piece, and man, my mouth watered right there. It was the light batter of it was such a good consistency. Because one thing I don't like typically about fried food is if it's heavily battered, because I think it takes away from what is actually being fried. But I was able to taste the shrimp, I was able to taste the batter, and then when I put a little soy sauce on that, it just really tied everything together, which was so good for me, honestly. And the pairing of miso soup and rice actually went really well with the dish. And I was just zipping back and forward, and it was just a good collection of flavors. And because one thing that I totally forgot about is that tempura isn't typically seasoned with anything extra. It's just the bare elements. But those bare elements are so good just because everything in Japan is fresh. So all those elements combined just made it such a good meal that night. Tempura is a popular dish in Japan just because of the versatility and just the limitless options you have when you make the meal. And I cannot stress that enough. It's mind-boggling to me just how many different forms of tempura there are out there. The light crispy texture makes for a savory bite every time you dig in for more. The natural flavors of the dish come out too just because nothing's altered with the ingredients. Tempura is also important to Japan because it marked the advancements in Japanese culinary skills through the advancement of the methods they use to create the dish. And that's one thing I love about food personally is how you can start from one point, but then you could perfect the way you make the food over time. And personally, I'm not that great of a chef, so I stick with one method, but it is so cool when I witness people especially those who live in the culinary world, and they talk about like, oh yeah, it used to take me like 5 hours to make this dish, but I know now how to do it in 1 hour, and it tastes even better. And I mean, I'm just like, hey, I believe you, because I know I can't do anything that good myself. I mean, I can make a good burger, but outside of that, I'm not that skilled to make things to this caliber. And that's why tempura is just a really great dish in Japan. Everything had a start point, especially when it came to what was used for the batter specifically. They strayed away from using sake, which probably for the best, but they strayed away from using that and came up with new methods that not only made the meal taste better, but also just simplified it to its core elements, which benefited the meal overall. Well, that's all the time we have for this episode. Thank you for listening to me ramble on about the importance of a good meal. If you want more, stay tuned. I have one more episode coming out to discuss more food. I want to end every episode encouraging you all to go out and try a new meal you've never had before. The world is varied with basically infinite meals to try. You will never know what your favorite meal may become if you never take that step into the unknown. This has been episode 3 of Savor Japan. Arigatou gozaimasu. Ja, mata ne. こんにちは, and welcome to the fourth and final episode of a 4-part podcast series that will explore the creativity, effort, and deliciousness of Japanese cuisine. I had the privilege to travel to Japan this summer, and while I was out there, I tried so many different famous Japanese dishes that made my taste buds dance around. In this podcast, I not only want to discuss the meals, but the cultural significance behind each dish. Food holds power, and I'll be breaking down the connection food helps grow. If you are a foodie like me, I encourage you to join me on this journey, exploring all these meals and the effectiveness behind them. Welcome to Savor Japan. In our final episode, we'll be breaking down the meal with endless options and the one thing people struggle to eat with chopsticks the most: sushi. And that last part is coming from experience too. It took me a while to get a hang of it. And you would think I would have learned a little bit more before I went to Japan, but I kind of slacked on that part, so that's on me. But sushi is by far the essential dish you are required to have if you ever find yourself in Japan. While you can go to a good sushi place within the United States, as I have said many times throughout the series, it will not compare to Japan. The ingredients for the sushi are so fresh, especially since Japan is surrounded by the ocean. So that is literally just the best seafood you can get, like anywhere. Sushi is comprised of a seaweed wrap, sushi rice, which is a specific type of rice used for sushi that's going to be a little bit more sticky. Typically, I would list off some of the many options you can have when you make a sushi roll, but there are literally too many to mention when it comes to sushi. Sushi is literally limitless. And I know in the last episode, I talk about how tempura is a bunch of endless options, but sushi surpasses that. Sushi is basically infinite because there are so many different combinations that you can have when you create sushi. Obviously, though, I'm not going to leave you guys hanging, so I will give you guys the popular choice, which is always having a type of seafood in it. And word of advice, the seafood will be prepared raw. And if you don't like raw fish or anything like that, sushi might not be for you. And to that, I say you should try it still, though. It is an acquired thing, I will admit. The first time I had sushi, at least in the United States, it was a little strange for me to eat raw fish. But, I think once you eat it enough, you're going to just be like, oh yeah, give me that. give me that raw fish right there. Thank you very much. But other than that, though, there are also different combinations of vegetables that people use inside the rolls as well. I know some people that even add a little egg on top of the dish just for a little extra pizzazz and flavor to it, which is actually pretty good. I was surprised because I didn't think egg would specifically be a good combination for sushi, but it works out pretty well. So, to construct a sushi roll, you will lay out a bamboo mat and place down your layer of seaweed. From there, you'll add your rice and the toppings of your choice on top of the rice. From there, you're gonna grab your mat and you're gonna roll it into a cylinder shape. After you got your cylinder shape, you're gonna cut that into individual rings, and that's how you make sushi. And I know that sounds really straightforward, and that's because it is. Sushi is probably gonna be the easiest meal you can make out of everything we have discussed throughout the duration of this podcast. And which is really good too, because sushi is definitely one of my top meals, just in general. The history for sushi is actually the shortest compared to all the other meals we talked about on the podcast as well. The history of the dish does begin in China once again, which originated between the 5th and 3rd centuries BC. And it actually started off as a way of preserving fish and salt. Nare zushi was a form of food preservation that appeared in Japan in the 8th century, and it still survives today in the form of foods such as carp sushi. Now, sushi was originally for festivals or feast days, but it became a widely common meal because, people fell in love with it. The interesting thing about sushi is that all the original elements of the dish mostly stay consistent over time. And that's just because sushi, at its core, is a really basic thing where you don't really have to change much about it. The only big switch up was the exclusion of sake, which, once again, I'm good with personally. Well, for the last time, let's dive into my own experience with sushi. While I was in Japan, I did have many opportunities to eat sushi, and I think a good portion of my meals was actually sushi. It's just because, as I said, I love it. It's just a really good meal, and it's really simple. And honestly, I feel like you can have sushi any time of the day. But the best experience I had with sushi was one night where my class and we went to an English school out in Japan in Abiko. When we first arrived there, we didn't really know what to expect. All we knew was that we were going to go to the school, meet some of the students there that were really eager to talk to us, and then we were going to make food with them. I was not personally aware of what we were going to make when we got there. So it was a little surprise when I saw we had a bunch of ingredients laid out and I found out we were making sushi. So I sat at a table with two of my fellow classmates, and we had two other English school students sit with us. And at first, the conversations we shared were pretty simple, pretty low key. And then finally, we went to making the sushi ourselves. Now, that was my first time ever making sushi. And I will say, it is definitely, it is an acquired skill. While I did gas it up earlier, talking about, yeah, it's pretty easy to do, pretty straightforward. Making sure you don't put too much on the roll is key to it, I would say. But we had a lot of options for what we wanted to include in our sushi roll. I believe the first one I did was pretty straightforward. I had imitation crab meat, a little cucumber in it, and then I think there was an onion too. I could be very mistaken on the onion part. Don't quote me on that. But I put that all on my roll, and I did the seaweed, I did the rice, and then I put the ingredients on and I rolled it up. Put a little soy sauce on it too, and I took my first bite, and I think I did pretty good, for my first time making sushi. And once again, one thing I love about Japan is just how at the core is just basic elements, but it's the combination of those elements which makes the meals so good. When I was eating my sushi, I was having the time of my life just because one, I knew I made it myself. And I will say this, a meal always tastes better when you make it yourself because you can be like, yeah, I did that. I did that right there. And you get to enjoy what you made. So I was just having a blast with that part. But no, though, but when it comes to sushi itself, though, it's just really good. I really do love seaweed. So I think it is a good way just to hold all the ingredients together. And it's just so nice just to have. It's refreshing, I would say, especially compared to like more greasy food, which are a lot more common in the United States. It's just a really it's just It's a different taste, which I think I really enjoy. And the raw factor doesn't really bother me either. And I will say this, because I've said it in the past episode where I personally did not like squid, but I did have squid that night, though. I did. Did my opinion change? No. But well, I had to experiment, though. And that's one of the best elements about sushi is that you have the opportunity to experiment with it, and it's just really cool because there were so many different options we had for in front of us. And I think at one point I made like a big sushi roll and I put everything on it, and it was still good. That's the thing, it was always good no matter what combination I went with, which was awesome. But that whole night itself was generally probably one of the best nights I had in Japan, just because once we broke the ice and we were talking with the students more, we realized just how cool they were. And even though our lives are very distinct, because the United States is very different from Japan, it's a whole different culture. We were able to find shared interests even through that. And in even with our differences, we still found connections we can make with that. And one of the connections we made was literally through the sushi, since we're all making sushi and we're all coming up with combinations and we're all talking about, oh, we think this would be the better option for it. One of the students there did really loves wasabi, and I personally have a really bad experience with wasabi in general. But the student was like, hey, you should try it, come on, just put the wasabi on it. And I was just like, no, I think I'm good. But, he ended up convincing me, and I was like, you know what? I'm going to do it because this kid was 15 and I wasn't going to get tested by a 15-year-old. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to do it, okay? So I let him put the wasabi on my roll. That was my first mistake right there. That was the big mistake because he put a big scoop of it on there, and I was like, that's a lot, but I'm not no punk, so I'm gonna do it. I was gonna do it, but yeah, I took that first bite. I instantly checked out. I was coughing up a storm, and I just felt so terrible. Because let me tell you one thing about wasabi is like at first it doesn't taste good, but the second it hits the back of your throat, you're done for it. And I started crying and everything, and then even my professor had to come to me. He was like, "Sorry, you're okay?" And I was just like, "No, I'm not okay." But they were very nice. They got me some water to help calm me down and whatnot. But overall, though, my experience with sushi there really spoke to me because it was just like a really fun time coming up with all those combinations. And I think that experience alone made me understand why sushi is such a beloved dish in Japan. The thing about sushi that makes it so popular is that it is in fact a form of art when you really think about it. When you prepare sushi, you're very careful about the selection of ingredients you have and the meticulous presentation that you end up going with at the end. And this tradition is actually passed down from generation to generation in Japan, with families perfecting their specific type of roll. And it's pretty amazing to get to see. If you ever have the chance yourself, I recommend going to a conveyor belt sushi place. I mean, that was one of the opportunities in Japan where I had sushi. And it was so cool, not only because of the conveyor belt, which I think is a cool way to get food in general, but the whole experience was really awesome just because there was like maybe like 100 different options of sushi you could get there, and a lot of them looked really good. Some of them, I will admit, were not for me, and that's okay because there were 99 other options I could have had that same time. So it's so amazing to me just how many ways you could enjoy food. It doesn't have to be the way your friend likes food. You can have your own experience with food, your own connections, your own personal meanings with it. And that's another reason why I do believe sushi is so popular. It's a way that people can connect with one another, a way that people could grow bonds. It's a way that you could literally start a conversation. You could literally go up to someone and just be like, "Hey, what's your favorite type of sushi?" Food really holds power, and I believe that's something a lot of people miss. And I have personally really loved exploring that throughout this podcast. Some of my favorite memories of all time literally dates back to the best meals I've had in my life. Sushi is just one of those experiences that I had in Japan that I will never forget and I'll always hold close to my heart because it was a really amazing time. perfecting my own role in my own special way. Well, that's all the time we have for this episode, and this brings an end to the podcast. Thank you from the bottom of my heart to listening to me ramble about the importance of having a great meal. I want to end this episode with one final encouragement for everyone to go out and try a new meal you never had before. If you're going to take anything away from this podcast, take away the power food really has. The world is varied not only with infinite meals, but infinite stories you can tell. You never know what your favorite meal may be if you never take that step into the unknown. I took a huge step into the unknown when I went to Japan. And I hope you guys do the same one day yourselves. This has been Savor Japan. Arigatou gozaimasu. Sayonara.